to record. Oh, you got it. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Diana. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a junior at Bates College, and I'm going to be presenting tonight. So if we could start just with everybody going around and saying their name, their pronouns, and kind of like who you are, what you represent, like that kind of stuff. I'll popcorn it to Cassie first.
Hey, I'm Cassie. I use she, her pronouns. I work with 350 Maine as their youth engagement coordinator, and through that, I help facilitate Maine Youth for Climate Justice. And I will pass it to Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I use she, her pronouns, and I work with the organization JustME for JustUS, and I'm super passionate about voting, and I'm really eager to find out what's going on with this election.
Can you popcorn into someone, Ashley?
Yeah, let's do Grace.
Hi everyone, my name is Grace, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am interning with MYCJ as the outreach lead, and I will popcorn it to Tasha.
Hi, I'm Tasha. I use she, her pronouns, and I sometimes volunteer with the Sunrise Movement, just doing phone banking and getting out the vote and stuff. And I'll popcorn it to Martha.
Hi, I'm Martha. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a Bates student here to support Yay Bates. Involved with a couple different student movement coalition efforts right now. Very new structure, very exciting stuff. Big fan of Diana, so.
Thank you.
I'll popcorn it to Jude.
Hello. I'm not entirely sure what the questions were. Was it just name, pronouns, and organizations you're with? Cool. Okay. What?
Oh, good.
Okay, sorry. My name is Jude. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a fellow with Planned Parenthood Votes New Hampshire right now, and also I volunteer with the Sunrise Movement. Can anyone who hasn't gone raise their hands? I joined a few seconds late.
Oh wait, I think it's me and Nina is the only ones who haven't gone.
Okay, cool. I'll popcorn it to Nina.
Hi, I'm Nina. I'm an intern with MYCJ. I use she, her pronouns. Dominique.
I'm Domi. I use he, him, his pronouns. I also go to Bates College, and I'm part of the Eco Reps. And I'm here with my two roommates. We're cooking dinner, so we're just gonna kind of listen. All right, thank you.
Yeah. Did Anna introduce herself? If you want.
Hi, I'm Anna. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with Main Strikes. My video is off because I'm doing some other work. But I'm here listening in.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I want to premise with, I know it's been a tough existence up until now, and these next couple days are going to continue to be really tough and critical to the coming times, especially for people in our generation and those to come. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and screen share, and we're just going to power through. Okay, so this is titled What to Expect, and it's supposed to be a play on what to expect when you're expecting, but that, I don't know if that came through, but that's okay.
It 100% came through. I was so confused.
Oh, okay.
In the most wonderful way. It was a great pun.
Awesome. It's What to Expect post-election edition. And so it's just going to be a guide to the days and the election night itself. So first, welcome. If everybody could just take a deep breath and exhale. We are at a good point, I think, in organizing, and I think that we're ready for the days to come, and we've done a lot of good work to get here. So we're gonna start with just some personal reflection, and if in the corner you see this little sunrise logo, That means that these slides or this information is from Sunrise, so I just want to give them credit for that. So we're going to start with this personal reflection. So if you have like a notebook or like a piece of paper or your computer tab or whatever, and just for like 5 minutes, I want you to think about, what can I take personal responsibility for as an individual in this coming crisis? What do I actually feel right now about this historical moment? And who am I and where am I actually located to lead in this moment? So we're just going to do about 5 minutes of reflection. Okay, so feel free to keep answering those questions, but we're going to come back to them later. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about election night and what we can expect. One, unless there's a landslide, second, someone's getting admitted. Okay, unless there's a landslide win for either candidate, results won't be clear on election night, and this is due to the number of mail-in ballots and the different policies in different states about how long we can keep counting those mail-in ballots. But it could take between like a week to 10 days to 2 weeks to count all of the votes and get like a definitive answer. But if there is like a landslide, if there's like a majority to one party, then that'll come earlier. And the key thing about not having the results on election night is that it leaves a lot of room for the current administration to convince people that there is voter fraud and that votes shouldn't continue to be counted after the election night, which could lead to not getting a full count of the votes and giving the presidency over to somebody who hasn't actually won the Electoral College. Yes, okay, I think that this is amazing. So I think I put this statistic in like a couple days ago, and it's that 90 million votes have already been cast, and that is 65% of the 2016 total. So like even after election night, after everything was counted in 2016, we've already surpassed more than half of that, and that's probably increased in the last couple days. So people are turning out to vote in like record numbers, and demographics like young people are also turning out in record amounts, and I think that that is something that we should like find hope in. Okay, so the projected results, the exciting part. This is from Politico. It's as of Halloween. And the presidency is leaning in favor of the Democrats. And in the polls that came out in the days after Halloween, that is still true. And then these are some of the other races that we'll be seeing. But I think that it's pretty much guaranteed that Biden will win the what's it called? The popular vote, at least. So what's going to really determine the election is the Electoral College from battleground states. And here it says that Biden needs to flip 38 of these electoral votes to win. And that can happen in any combination of these battleground states. So from what I saw in the polls, I think this morning, it's projected that he'll win Pennsylvania, that he'll win Florida, and that just those two will be enough. But like as everything, as we learned in 2016, like all polls have to be taken with a grain of salt to the actual ability they have of predicting results. But right now, people are pretty sure pollers are pretty sure that he will win the Electoral College. And then this is just a map of how some of the different like how the breakdown looks. Okay, so the main part of this presentation is looking at the post-election scenarios, and this is by a group called the Transition Integrity Project, TIP, and they are a group of 100 Democrats, Republicans, government officials, political analysts, like PR people, like people who have experience in how elections go and the public image that goes around them. And they came together over the summer to play out the different scenarios of what this election could look like. And they came out with 4, but the 3 that we're going to look at is that 1, Trump attempts to stay in power without a clear electoral outcome on election night. B, there's a clear Biden victory on election night or shortly after, or C, that there's a clear Trump victory. So those are the 3 scenarios that we're gonna like unpack a little bit more. So we're gonna start with the first one, which is that, I'm gonna move this, that Trump attempts to stay in power without a clear electoral outcome on election day. And so a big part of this is gonna come from Trump trying to undermine the election process and to undermine the number of mail-in ballots that still need to be counted, or the election process itself, or any number of things. And he's going to kind of try to sow like discord and animosity within his followers. That's gonna result in like political unrest. And this is what we're expecting for, and this is what organizers are, I think, on the most part, planning for. Yeah, and so the signs point to one of the primary strategies being to halt the vote count and to stretch out this like period of ambiguity long enough to wear out resistance and to leverage all available state power. So this means like taking the battle to courts, taking the battle to social media, taking the battle to any platform that can bolster his credibility in trying to show that the election was fraudulent. Oh, okay. Yeah, and so this Sunrise considers this to be one of the most like variable outcomes or scenarios, because there's many different ways that Trump can try to make the election seem fraudulent, or to make people distrust the results that are coming out, especially because there's going to be maybe like, let's say like a 10-day delay until all of the mail-in ballots are counted. And if like, okay, I know we're all young, but like if you look at the 2000 presidential election between who was it, George Bush, the second one, and Al Gore, that presidency came down to one state and like a couple counties in Florida, and the way that like public opinion and going through the courts stalled their ability to count every single vote that came in. So I think that we're going to see something similar in this situation, is that if it seems like an ambiguous result on election night, or even if it seems like Biden is winning, that they're going to try to stop the vote count. And as they take it through the courts, ultimately what happened in 2000 was that it made it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court halted the vote count. That is absolutely what can and likely would happen in this scenario, because we now have a very conservative Supreme Court, which I think was clearly like an anticipatory move on the Trump administration. Okay. Oh yeah, the second thing is that this outcome also includes a split between the Electoral College and the popular vote. And that's expected, I think, if Trump wins, he is not going to win through the popular vote. He's going to win through the Electoral College, like what happened in 2016. And this is the important part for people who are organizing in their communities, or just general knowledge, that in the immediate chaos after Election Day, there will be like protests, there's likely to be violence, and then there's going to be like what we saw over the summer with like the police and the military and different people stepping in to discredit protesters and to make them seem like the violence is being incited from both sides or from the left, to stop the credibility process. So we have to be aware that that is coming. So that's scenario A. Scenario B, there is a clear Biden victory on election night or shortly after. In my mind, from what I have seen, I think that this is the likely outcome of what's going to happen. But you know what, don't even put me on the record saying that, because I don't want to say that and then that's not what happens. But if you look at the polls, that's what I think will happen. So on election night, the results come in and Biden is leading, and he's leading in the Electoral College and the popular vote. In this situation, the Trump administration is going to attempt to cast doubt on the official results of the election, and once again continue to or try to stop the counting of mail-in ballots that are coming in after the election. And as it says, will use all measures at their disposal to cast doubt on the election itself, polarize their base, and attempt to move the GOP to question the results. And those last two are going to be critical, because if they can polarize their base and move their base to violence, that's going to incite like unrest and just like chaos across the country, which in the end will help the Trump administration's agenda to make the entire election seem like it was shady, and to make it seem like his direction will be what can unite the country after this chaos that his base has inflicted. Yeah, and once again, there's like any opportunity for doubt and chaos and misinformation to be spread. I think that the misinformation is really going to be coming from social media, and from yeah, mainly through the platforms of social media and the way that the Trump administration will reach out to their followers and seek to spread disinformation. Okay, yeah, and Sunrise also said that this is probably the most probable scenario based on current polling. Their polling was from a couple weeks ago, but it's still similar now. And this is the situation where the Biden camp and the Democrats have to have like a really strong and unified like counterattack to what the Trump administration is going to try to do, so that they can unite all of the people that really just want a peaceful transition of power and don't want civil unrest and all of that, and they want the election to just be over. And so that's going to have to come from a, as they say, like a raw power approach from the Biden camp. So I don't know how much you all know about Sunrise, but their goal is to get a Green New Deal passed at all states of all levels of government. So if Biden wins, the position that leaves us in as climate justice organizers is that we still have like a lot of work to do to push the Biden administration to the point where they are passing and like supporting legislation that is enough to meet the 2030 climate deadline set by scientists. So the point, I think, of this scenario is that like, even if Biden wins tomorrow night or in the days after, which is unlikely, but in the weeks after at least, there is still so much work to be done for organizing and for activism, because the Biden administration falls kind of on the center of a lot of critical issues. So, scenario C, a clear Trump victory. By the end of the election, results will show that Trump is in a commanding lead of the Electoral College in a tight popular vote. Again, I don't think he'll win the popular vote, but he could win the Electoral College, depending if he wins key swing states. So what would happen in this situation is that Trump would declare victory and immediately move to consolidate his power and authority. But there won't be much of a struggle for legitimacy, because I don't think that the Biden administration would mount a disinformation or election illegitimacy like propaganda in the same way that the Trump would in the opposite situation. In this situation, so there's going to be protests regardless of the result, because people are going to be protesting either against Trump or against the election process, against not counting all the votes, or against where Joe Biden stands on different issues. So the protests that would happen in the situation where Trump has a clear victory, those would be repressed, and they would be used as a narrative for different kinds of enforcement, most likely militarized, like we saw over the summer in different states. This is the worst situation that we could have, is 4 more years of Trump. Yeah, and as I say, it's almost statistically impossible for Trump to win the popular vote by legitimate means, and this would lead to intense voter suppression. So you might actually have the Democratic Party coming out and like asking for like recounts in key states, or pointing out the voter suppression. Yeah. So those are the 3 kind of key situations that we could find ourselves in tomorrow night and in the days/weeks to follow. I think what they all have in common is that there's going to be a lot of pointing fingers and calling the election process illegitimate, even though a lot of work has gone in to make this election as like secure as possible. And most of what the voter suppression that we're seeing has come from the Republican side. And there's also going to be a strong protest reaction from people on a variety of issues in a variety of formats. And I would say that would be across the country after the election. So what can we do to mobilize for a fair election? First and foremost, if you haven't, and if you can, vote in person on election day. Know your voter rights, talk to your friends in your circles, and make sure that the people in your life have voted, can vote, all of that. tomorrow, there's a variety of organizations that you can volunteer with to support safe voting, like just going to the polls and like keeping an eye out, making sure that like no one is trying to like suppress different voters or like spreading misinformation, handing out water, handing out snacks, if the voting lines get really long. In Maine, it's going to be like really fucking cold tomorrow. So that is another way that we could support people, by handing out hand warmers or something like that. Yeah. And finally, like listening to trustworthy sources for election updates. Part of what happened in 2000, which I don't think would happen today, is that news stations like ABC, NBC, they all wanted to be the first station to report who won the election. So they would call the election before the actual results were in, and then have to like recant their declaration of who won, which I think stemmed or influenced the way that people just wanted the election to end, and then the protests that led to them stopping the counts and ultimately for Bush to win. So listen to trustworthy sources for election updates. I think everyone is anticipating a long election, so news stations are going to be ready for that. Okay. A phenomenal coalition of people has come together to form this organization called Protect the Results. And they are bipartisan, and their goal is just to get every vote counted, and to have a legitimate election. And it's a coalition of, I think, like hundreds of different partners and different social justice groups. So these are all of the protests that, as of, I think, maybe 2 days ago, they had scheduled, and they have them scheduled across the country. And so Bates students, there's one happening in downtown that we're gonna all plan to go for, so keep an eye out for those emails. But yeah, I think that this is a great place to start. And on the Protect the Results website, they have a toolkit for people who are hosting or attending these protests. You can check it out. And they have a lot of information about like what to expect, how to stay safe, that kind of stuff. So that's Protect the Results, a key, I think, player. And their protests are happening, I think, as soon as Wednesday. These are some other organizations, and Anna, if you want to like step in and talk about any of them, my favorite is the Kuo-meter, which is a website that basically like tracks different like political events and like moves this meter towards like a coup from the government and like refusing to accept a peaceful transition to democracy. And so right now we're on the yellow, and depending on what happens in the next couple days, we'll move towards probably the red. Yeah, and then Choose Democracy is another one that has a lot of good information and different ways that you can volunteer. Hold the Line is a guide to defending democracy. And if you want to look more into the organizing principles that we should rely on in the coming days and the things that we've learned from other people that have tried to protect a fair election in other countries, the Hold the Line has a really awesome guide that gives you that history and gives you a look into what the next couple weeks will look like as well. Anna, do you want to say anything about that?
I just want to say I put all the resources in the chat. They range from online guides to actual actions and the Kuo-meter. Definitely, if you feel safe, if you aren't concerned about pre-existing conditions and you are able to, definitely go to a protest. If you don't, or like me, if you feel like you have a responsibility to like your school, where I don't want to potentially endanger my school because I'm going in person, then, you know, there's just lots of things that you can do. And some of these groups are going to be having protests no matter what. And some groups are only doing it if the kind of red line of a coup is crossed, if that makes sense. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff floating around. Remember, like, if you do go, definitely be safe. And even though a lot of organizations, like Maine Youth for Climate Justice, for example, isn't holding events as an organization, but that doesn't mean that people can't go as individuals. So yeah, I guess that's just kind of what I wanted to say. Also, Diana, is there going to be a question thing? Because I actually have a ton of questions.
Totally, yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you for that. I forgot, one resource I forgot to put up here is Sunrise. So Sunrise is hosting, they have like a ton of stuff coming up. Also, Choose Democracy has like different trainings that you can do for mobilizing and organization skills. So you can check out their website for specifically what they have, or maybe it's Hold the Line. I think it's actually Hold the Line, yeah. But Sunrise on, I believe, Wednesday or Thursday is having like a mass training call. If you want to be part of that, and you don't have to be part of Sunrise to jump onto their call. And learn kind of some basics for organizing in the days after the election. Okay, my final thing before we go to questions is just like a plea to like take care of yourselves and to take care of others. Whatever the results of the election are, I think that we're in for a long fight, and that means that we have to look at our own capacity and take care of ourselves. So listen to your body, your mental health too. There's like, I haven't even talked about like the fact that like we're in a pandemic right now and it's getting worse. And like people are living with like record like anxiety and stress, and like listen to yourself and like take care of yourself too. If you're going out protesting, know your rights, know your resources, stay safe, and if possible, at least take a buddy with you. And finally, like, we're in this together. There are so many people that are getting ready to go into the streets and fight for this democracy, as like fucked up and flawed as it is. And just remember that you are not in this fight alone. And that's it. Thank you. Okay, the floor is open to questions now.
I got a question.
Go for it.
First of all, great presentation. I'm just wondering, like, what's up with the protests on Wednesday? And is it in Lewiston?
Yeah,
And
it's in downtown.
where do I get more info about it?
I'm gonna send out an email to like EC and a bunch of other listservs tonight, so you'll get that information soon.
Sweet.
Also, I did pop the registration link in the chat if you scroll up, so you can register through our Google form for the Lewiston protest.
Anna, what are your questions, Anna?
Yes. So something we didn't talk about was kind of like, how could Trump use the Supreme Court to get, I mean, you kind of touched on it, but like, how could he use the Supreme Court to get what he wants? And then also, like, how much power does the Supreme Court really have when it comes to voting? And then also, totally separate question is, no matter who wins, we really need the Senate to be flipped, because they could bar whatever Trump wants to do, and also Biden can't get anything done with the current Senate. So how do you know, like, how is the Mitch McConnell race looking? How's the Susan Collins race looking, et cetera, et cetera? Do you know about any of that?
Yeah. So there's a lot of questions. I'll start with the Supreme Court. From my understanding, what's going to happen with the Supreme Court is that it's going to end up being either a debate about the result, like contesting the actual results of the election, or it's going to be contesting how many votes should still be counted after election day. And we've already seen those races happening, those court cases moving their way up, which is why some states have decided not to count anything that comes in after the polls close on election night, while some states are like, no, we're going to keep counting for like 10 days after. What I assume will happen in my own political analysis here is that it would be a contesting of the results, and it would work its way up the Supreme Court, and then the conservative Supreme Court would side with Donald Trump, which explains the really rapid push to have another conservative justice appointed. And it would also be, so what happened in 2000 was that the case that made it all the way up to the Supreme Court was, should we continue counting these votes that we haven't counted yet? And that, like, nobody knows what those votes held, if they could have flipped the election, but they decided, the Supreme Court was like, no, we're not going to count them, we're going to call the election. And so that is what I think would happen. Your second question, I don't know about so what the Politico analysis said is that the Senate races are the one, like the control of the Senate is like too close to call. I know that from what I've heard in Maine specifically, it seems like Susan Collins is on her way out. And Sarah Gideon has like a wide range of support behind her. So that's pretty good. Did I answer most of your questions? Take that as a yes. Okay. Other questions?
Wait, if Biden wins Florida tomorrow morning or tomorrow night, are we basically like in the clear?
Yeah. If he wins Florida, that's it, because it has enough electoral counts to get him.
Sweet. Hopefully. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'd seen people saying the same thing about Texas. Do you guys do you have a are you leaning one way or the other on like if Texas or Florida is like more important?
Texas is less likely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, Texas is less likely because it's still technically showing Trump ahead in the polls. It's closer than it's ever been, but it's still not necessarily a guarantee in any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. And because Texas has more electoral votes, it has 38 versus Florida that has 29. But Biden's expected to flip enough of the other swing states to like make up the difference. Okay. If nobody
I
has,
actually have a quick question.
yeah,
I was wondering, like, do we know like what the current rules are as far as like vote counting and that kind of thing? Like, I know it can vary between states, but do we know kind of what the general consensus is?
I don't know what the general consensus is. I just know that it does vary state by state. I think what's happened is that most like Republican leaning states have decided. So this is the thing, is that like the people that are sending mail-in ballots tend to be Democratic, and the people that are going to vote in person tend to be Republican, just because COVID is a political issue now. So what could happen tomorrow night is that like as mail-in ballots are being counted, like the polls show from in-person voting that Trump is leading, but then as the mail-in ballots are counted, that flips to a Biden lead. So I'm not sure. It depends state by state and what they have done in the last couple of weeks to stop that. And Jude just linked a super helpful New York Times article about that. Oh yeah, that looks really helpful.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Also super helpful is the daily from today and also like 2 days ago or something. But today is really good. It's just about the 3 scenarios. But if Biden wins, is Sunrise expecting like a lot of protests from like Trump supporters? Yeah.
I think that it depends like how close. I think no matter what, like Trump is just gonna like say like really inflammatory rhetoric that's gonna get like his core base to like go fucking protest. I think that if it's a clear Biden victory, the like left and the liberals won't come out as much, so like there won't be as many protest clashes, which I think is what's going to lead to like the violence. But I would expect his protesters to definitely be out there if he loses, because they're going to think that it was like a fraudulent election and they're going to go out and like riot for their rights. Yeah. that's really scary, but yeah. If no one has any more questions, we're just gonna move into like a sharing and like processing space. And I think that we're gonna go back to the questions that we answered at the beginning of like, what are we each personally responsible for? How do we feel in this moment? And what does our positionality really dictate about our capacity to be leaders in this movement? So please feel free to share. Also, I don't know if you guys, I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's okay.
I was just gonna say, like, if you guys are down, we can all unmute, except Domi, that's like cooking, just so that like it's like an easier space and it's not just like silence. So feel free to unmute even if you don't want to talk.
I was just gonna answer like the first question. I feel like a really like important like individual kind of like responsibility is just like making sure that all your friends are like at the polls if they haven't voted already. And I think that's like a super important way to kind of be an activist, but in like a small way, like just like checking in with your network, being like, hey, do you have a ride to the polls? If not, I can help, or like things like that. I think is really important. I also wrote down like having a positive attitude about things, but also not being afraid to speak out like when necessary.
Yeah, no, I totally feel that. And I think like one of the most important things that we can do is relational organizing, because like making phone calls is super important, and like, you know, reaching out to voters that way, but also like reaching out to people in your circle and people that you know. Because I mean, I know that if one of my friends told me to do something, I would be a lot more likely, and this is like what they tell you in every single training, but like if one of my friends told me to do something, I would do it. But like if a random stranger called me on the phone, I probably wouldn't. And so I think like going into this by like, you know, reaching out to like people you follow on Instagram that like maybe you like reply to their stories every once in a while, like stuff like that is super powerful, because it's like you have a more personal connection to it. And that kind of like humanizes the issue and gets people to like understand why it's so important.
And you just said like social media, and like that's going to play such a huge role in these next couple days, as it's played like in every major event that's happened in our generation. And I think that like if you have a valid news source and you are just like updating your story, whatever it is, with like that news, just so that people who like don't want to go look for it themselves are still getting fed like the right information, is like a small thing that you could do too.
Wait, so which question are we talking about? Sorry, I was
Just like all of them.
all of them. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's really interesting when you talk about like being a leader of the movement, because I've never seen myself as a leader of the movement like ever. I just feel like I keep ending up in the right place at the right time. But I think that this year is a lot of learning for me about how to take on those leadership roles, even though that feels like an uncomfortable place to be in sometimes. Mm-hmm. I think that if we all take on a little bit of leadership, then that will help us prevent some of the burnout. And so instead of having like that one person who's in charge of everything, we have like 20 people who all have their like tasks, and I'm excited for that kind of more collaborative work.
And leadership can happen on like such a small scale, like as we were talking about earlier, like just messaging your friend to make sure that they have everything they need, like that's being a leader. And I think that it's really important to remember that leadership isn't necessarily, you know, being the guy standing on the soapbox. Like it's also just, you know, being the person to check in and make sure that everyone has what they need.
Yeah, and I also, one of the things that I wrote down for the answer to the first question, I think, was it's super important to do electoral work, but it's also super important to like show up for impacted community members and like, you know, be there for each other if the election doesn't go the way we want it to. Like, right. We have to support each other. Like that, you know, that's going to be one of the biggest things, is we have to support each other and be there for each other. And that's not to say that like we shouldn't fight with everything we have to win this election, but also there's going to be a lot more to be done.
Yeah, and that also like recognizing our own positionality and like how we'll be impacted by the results of this election versus how other people will be impacted. I think that's going to play a really critical role in like deciding what you're comfortable stepping up and doing and what risks you're comfortable taking, especially if you're participating in more like direct action, protesting and stuff like that. Another thing I find like super helpful as I like practice leadership is like planning. I think it takes away so much anxiety when you just know like what is my personal plan in these different scenarios. How much am I willing to like step up? How much am I willing to sacrifice for this greater movement? Is an important question I think we should all think about too.
Yeah, I think the point about like soapbox versus like direct organizing is really important. Like I feel like I'm often the person on the soapbox, and you know, recently, like this past month, I've been saying a lot to people like, oh, I don't directly support politicians without critique, which is like such a dissociated kind of pretentious thing to say, even though it's true. Like I don't really believe in directly supporting politicians who aren't gonna actually take care of the communities that they trot on to get to their roles. But I feel like that's, that's kind of preachy. So like recently I was like, okay, I can still critique Biden and Sarah Gideon, but also do direct texting for them. Because what if I woke up on Wednesday and was like, I just preached about this and didn't actually do anything? So, I think you can do both. I think you can hate electoralism and still like do it.
I totally agree. And like for me, sometimes when like certain people say like I'm not gonna vote, like I don't believe in like voting, I'm like, you can still not agree with it, but do it as like one of the first steps to how you engage politically.
And I know this like metaphor, I guess, has been going around quite a bit, so you guys have probably heard it, but I really like the metaphor where it's like politicians, it's like just like riding a bus. Like you're not going to just skip the bus because you're like, they're not taking me where I want to go. Like you're going to get on the bus, it's going to take you the closest to where you want to go. So you might not agree 100% with a politician, but it's still so important to vote for the politician that's going to get you most of the way there.
I've never heard that analogy. I like it. Do people have any fears that they want to share? I don't know how much like how many spaces that I've been in these last couple weeks that have just like asked me like are you scared? Like how are you feeling like before this critical moment? So, and I know we're all a bunch of strangers kind of, but sometimes those are good spaces to share too.
I think the thing that scares me most is becoming numb to the reality of what's happening and the impact of what's happening. Because I think it's like this evolutionary thing, like when life gets so bad, it's easier to just shut it off.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I've been struggling a lot with that in the last few weeks.
I relate.
I think I'm scared of like Trump winning and like us protesting, and then there's like straight up like a fascist police state imposed on us. And alternatively, Biden winning, and then Trumpers, like I don't know if you've been seeing on Twitter, but they've been like shutting roads down and stuff all over.
Yeah.
And they're obviously like really like active right now. And I think it's like a lot because of this Hunter Biden thing that they think is happening. So I'm worried that if Biden wins, they're gonna be out and about with like their guns and stuff, And then like, yeah, that's just terrifying. And also, Trump will still control the police at that point.
I'm concerned that there's going to be massive spikes of corona because of protests and stuff, and a lot of that will weigh on low income and communities of color, and then it'll just be like in the fight for democracy we ended up hurting all these people. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's scary.
I'm scared about the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
When her confirmation happened, and just like overnight, like in the fucking dark of night, and I was like, the presidency is important, the Senate is important, but the Supreme Court decides things that like have an impact for like decades and centuries after they make those decisions in a way that the presidency and the Senate don't. And I don't even know if it's possible to like impeach a Supreme Court justice. And that is very, very scary to me. Because I feel like that's the like bigger fight. Also climate change, obviously, but like that's like the bigger fight that we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like more specifically, I'm like terrified that Roe v. Wade could get overturned. And I never know how to pronounce it, but like Obergefell, I'm not good at pronouncing it. It's the one that like legalized gay marriage. I'm really nervous about that getting overturned as well. Because it doesn't seem like they have any respect for precedent at this point.
Yeah.
But they still have the power to set precedent, and I think that's where that's what's really scary.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, are people gonna mobilize in like the numbers that we need them to mobilize in order to like fight these things that happen? Because at the end of the day, like our government is still a social construct, but like you need so many people to decide to change it for it to change. That was a lot of dark stuff. Does anybody have anything that they are like hopeful or that is like carrying them forward right now?
Yeah. So I feel like the hope that I have for like the things that we could accomplish under Biden, not because of him, but because he'll be like more open to what we want to do. I feel like that's been sort of what's been carrying me through, because like Biden is absolutely not my top choice, never was, never will be. Like, but what he is an option who will listen to what we have to say a little bit more than Trump will. And I think that there are so many things that won't change under Biden, but I don't think that I'll be as afraid all the time as I am under Trump. And it's just that little bit of like, okay, there's still work, like there will still be work to be done, but we'll be able to like take a breather, and we'll be able to like have a fighting chance at the Green New Deal. And we'll be able to have a fighting chance for all of these things that we really need to keep our community safe. And it won't be as much of an uphill battle. And I think that like looking forward to being able to accomplish something a little bit more tangibly than just like being afraid all the time has been sort of helping me a lot.
And the other thing is, I think Biden also said that he would sign in like protections for like the LGBTQ plus community, and especially with like the Supreme Court right now, and like Fulton versus Philadelphia on Wednesday, that being a decision that's going to happen soon, and you know, the threat of like gay marriage being reversed. Like, I think that would be really important, and so I'm like hopeful about that. If Biden does win, I think that would at least be a better situation. So yeah.
For me, I have a lot of hope in like other countries, because I do think that if we end up in a situation where Donald Trump is like fighting to like win this election when it's very clear that Biden has won, I think we will have other countries like backing us up and being like, you need to step down, or we're gonna like, you know, do like economic things to hurt you and that, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I do think that other countries will have our back and will like stand up for us if that happens, which does give me a lot of hope.
I've never thought about that. That's really interesting.
I also have like weird hope in like other countries and like how other countries are great, because I'm like, you know what, when I'm a college student, if America is still an issue, I can just go do like field research in New Zealand and leave. Like it's like this weird hope that like as long as other countries are fine and this isn't the whole world, like, you know, can just go.
I have a lot of hope in what I feel like we've been doing locally, or what we have the energy to do locally. I love living in the town of Lewiston. I think there's a lot of really great things happening in the town that, regardless of the national outcome, we can continue to engage with that community and learn from that community.
Honestly, I have hope in like people our age and people younger and like people that are like fucking tired and they're like, this is not the world that I want and we're gonna like keep fighting for it. I think if we're like this young and we're already like trying to like turn shit up, then we're bound to accomplish something in our lifetimes. So that's good. In our last minute, if you want to grab any of the resources that were shared in the chat, go for it. Does anybody have anything else hopeful they want to leave us with?
Like you kind of said, I'm just really like hopeful in groups like this. Like we have networks and we have groups of people who are really passionate about this and who aren't just gonna like stand by and watch, you know, horrible things happen. So I am really like happy and hopeful that we have these kinds of groups. I think that's really awesome.
I also think that the focus and the centering of self-care has made me really hopeful, because I think that by setting those realistic sort of standards for who we are as human beings, that means that we're actually going to be able to make this an ongoing fight. And so I find a lot of hope in that.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that this call made somebody feel better. I was worried it was just gonna be like sad and like stressful. So that's good. I want to thank you all for like showing up on your Monday night. Good luck tomorrow. I hope that you can stay safe, that you can stay brave in the coming days and weeks. And if you need something, like reach out to people, reach out to like this group of people or to your organizing networks or whatever it is. Thank you. I think that I don't know how to like end it.